Hello, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Life is messy and amazing and challenging and wonderful and painful and joyous and boring and fun and stressful and carefree. Life is hard. Life is beautiful, and it's all of these things often at the same time. A powerful way to sum it up is this: life is complex. Joining me today is Marie Vakakis, and you may remember Marie if you have been a listener of the podcast for some time. Marie joined me for episode 59, and she is joining me again today. She's the founder of the Therapy Hub. She is a mental health social worker, a family therapist, and host of the podcast, This Complex Life. Marie, thank you so much for being back with me here again for another episode of my podcast, Well, Hello Anxiety.
It's a pleasure. I think we're going to just keep tag teaming and having each other on each podcast.
I think so. I love that your new season of your own podcast is called This Complex Life. It is just, they're three simple words, but they really say it all. And I'm curious to know what prompted you to name your new season This Complex Life. And I know you're having a whole variety of different conversations around these themes. I'd really just love to know more about kind of what brought you to this new chapter of your own podcasting life and your own work life as well.
It was really tricky because I work in mental health and I also work with relationships. So trying to figure out how those kind of come together was actually quite difficult to articulate. And so I do the treatment side of mental ill health or mental illness, but I also work with relationships with couples and families. And the thing that I guess was the most or stood out to me was the conversations that people have, and a lot of things that I'd noticed young people or even family say is, oh, I saw this meme or I saw this TikTok or I saw this reel, and it's a really, really small snippet of something taken out of context. And so I wanted to provide longer form content that put things into, well, maybe not necessarily still into context because they're still very general topics, but could give us a chance to explore some of these things a little more with a little more detail and a little more robust. And, some of the episodes to date that I think of, like, let's say worry, it's not as simple as just saying like, well, just stop worrying, or what's a tool to get rid of worry. That's a whole conversation. And so I think one of the bits that was missing in the work that I had been doing and the work I was putting out there and the content I was creating was having more deeper conversations and really understanding the nuance and the complexity. And so I was tossing around with things like this messy life, this complex life, all these different things. And this one just sort of landed. And then, the overthinker part of me was like, is this grammatically correct? Should it be a complex life, or is it the complexities of life? And then I'll stuff it. It doesn't matter. I'll just run with it because, that was, it just felt like that kind of made sense. And it might not land well for some people. I think some people still think, is it relationships or mental illness? And that's like, it's all a none. And they're also entwined and intrinsically linked that I couldn't separate them. Yes. And so I'm speaking around all of those different things in a variety of ways.
Oh, it says it all. When I grew up thinking that life was, nobody ever taught me that it's completely natural and normal to feel all feelings and that it is not natural to feel happy all the time. I grew up thinking that happy was the default, happy, relaxed, carefree. And I'm talking about someone here who also grew up with anxiety. So I didn't feel that way, but I thought that that's what other people felt. And so if there was an anomaly or a blip or something went wrong, that was almost like a deviation from the norm, and that you deviate and your feelings would change. But then the default setting for everybody was this happy, and that because that's what you would see, that's what people would show. I grew up sort of in the 80s, and I lived with anxiety. So I had a head full of worry, terrible worry, and all of these physical symptoms that I didn't understand to be anything other than my experience. But on the outside, it just looked like everybody else was having the time of their lives. And when I learned that all feelings are important, that mental health is about feeling what we feel in the situations that we feel them and being able to regulate and express and work through what we're feeling and have support for our mental health, that life is complex and it's not always one thing or another. It's everything. That's, I think, what really, like, the name of your podcast really speaks to me, because I think just the understanding alone that life is so complex. It's all the things I said at the start of the episode and more, and often at once. I think that alone is a really nice insight for people to start to sort of take the pressure off themselves.
Yeah, I think that's some of the stuff that I see in the people that I work with is, seeing emotions as information, not as directives, seeing them as little flags that indicate what's important to you, and realizing that every single feeling activates a response. You can still then choose that response. And so these are some really complex kind of conversations that we can unpack and unravel that often we don't get to explore just out and about. And so a lot of the guests are people who are either therapists or work in mental health. There's a few solo episodes that I do. So it's really giving you a bit of a peek behind the scenes as to the kinds of topics and themes people bring into therapy or into, conversations where they're trying to maybe be more vulnerable or explore who they are and life in a more, I guess, deeper way. So you're not going to walk out of it with like a checklist of things to do. It's a lot of food for thought.
I love that expression, food for thought. So could you please serve up a little food for thought for listeners today around where to start when it comes to building more ways of living this complex life and being able to manage when things become complicated or are going wrong?
Wow, that's a huge question and quite a big one. I think the one thing I would encourage people to really think about is starting to acknowledge that life isn't supposed to be happy all the time. We're not built to be happy. In fact, our brains are built to be the opposite. If we were happy and content all the time, we wouldn't survive. So starting to accept that life comes with pain, life comes with suffering, it does come with setbacks. How you then navigate those is really important. And when I encourage a lot of people to think about what they value and what's important, that can often be the kind of the compass to then do the rest of the work. So if you take some time to think, I want good relationships, or I want my kids to have good friendships, or family is really important, piece those kind of things out, put them out, and then think, what do I need to do to get there? You can't have strong relationships without vulnerability. You can't have good communication without conflict. Some things come hand in hand. And this is where maybe that gives you a bit of incentive, perhaps, to sit through that discomfort of learning these skills and actually recognizing, maybe it's even starting with recognizing your aversion to discomfort, or seeing discomfort as, well, that means I shouldn't do it or it's bad. So starting to think, well, I want to have more vulnerable conversation. It means I have to be vulnerable, or I do want my children to have these great relationships, so I need to role model that to them. It's really helpful to kind of have a few things to be your compass to kind of guide you. Otherwise, it can feel really overwhelming. And I compare it to physical health. If you just went to a trainer and you said, I just train me, and they're like, well, what are you working towards? It's like, just train me, what's best? It's like, well, do you want to run a marathon? Do you want to improve mobility? Is it flexibility? Are you looking for consistency? Do you want to run faster? Do you want to get stronger? Do you want to swim? Like, it's just, you're going to kind of be all over the place. So maybe having something to work on can be, a bit of direction.
It's so true, isn't it? The things that make life meaningful go hand in hand with pain and with struggle. And we've all experienced this in our own families. And for those of us that are parents, you know, I have a lot of friends who are parenting teenagers just like me, and common kind of conversations are around the challenges, and anything that's sort of really worthwhile and that fills our heart is also going to put a strain on our heart as well, not just, and I'm not just sort of speaking literally, but sort of metaphorically as well. And I know from a personal point of view that just that understanding, and I want to live a meaningful life. And so if I want to live a life that is filled with relationships and connections and family and purposeful work and doing hard things, that's going to go hand in hand with challenge and struggle. How do you help people to sort of identify what's important to them? If you were working with someone in therapy who'd not looked at their values before, or really taken a step back to sort of think what matters to me, where would you suggest is a good place for people to start so they kind of know where they're going, they know what they're trying to get out of life, and therapy if that's what they need?
I have a recent episode that's just on finding your values, so people can kind of search for that. If it's in therapy, I have created a getting ready for therapy journal. So that's available through the Therapy Hub, and it gives you prompts as to what you want to work through, what are your goals, like things to think about if you're looking to go to therapy. So both of those can be quite helpful. It could be starting really small and thinking about, you know, sometimes I call it a bullseye activity. So you're familiar with ACT, you would have done something similar, literally a piece of paper, 4 quadrants, and, you know, look at work, hobbies, relationships, and personal, and then pick 1 or 2 values for each of those. And then it's about thinking how you're showing up rather than reaching a goal. So if you value connection, then it's like, well, how am I connecting, and then what's getting in the way of that? So for a lot of people, it is family, it is friends, and then it might be taking that kind of hard look at yourself and saying, I say these are important, but my actions aren't aligning with my values, and what is possible, what can I do? If it is, you know, if you're like, family's important, but I only see them every Christmas, well, what can you do in between? Is it communicating digitally? Is it that you need to find different ways to connect, or more frequently? It doesn't always have to be, well, family's only important if I can do Sunday dinner. So it's really separating some of those goals and values and re-examining them. But I would go back to those comments you made and what we talked about earlier of recognizing that anything worthwhile comes with pain, and not trying to get rid of it, not trying to minimize it. You know, often when someone is in grief or they have a relationship breakup, we're straight away so keen to say there's more fish in the sea, or, oh, it's okay that they were old, or they died for these reasons, or it's good you had time with, like, they would try and take it away. And perhaps the place to start is let it be. It's normal, healthy, fine to feel that way. And we don't have to get rid of it. We don't have to try and like make jokes about it. We don't have to try and lighten the mood. Just sit with it. Just tolerate the discomfort of a yucky feeling.
Yes.
And that's okay. And that might be the biggest first step for a lot of the families I work with. A lot of the parents just like, I want my kid to be happy. It's like, well, that's impossible. Life doesn't work that way. Let them feel sad if their dog died. Let them be upset that grandma passed away. That's okay. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to do anything. The solution is in the connection and in holding space and letting that person feel those feelings and know that you're there for them.
Yes, and in a safe place where we as the trusted adult can also manage ourselves, our own responses in that, which is hard. And, you know, thinking of, and I know you're a dog lover, as am I will stop strangers in the street. My kids, one of my kids in particular will do that now. Excuse me, can I please pat your dog? Honestly, everywhere I go, even when I was in London, I said to my brother, do people like you to stop them and pat their pets? He goes, no one talks to each other. They keep to themselves. Anyway, we were at this beautiful flower market, the Columbia Road Flower Market, and there was this gorgeous little cavoodle puppy. And I just said to the owner, I thought, dog owners love their dogs and they love it when other people love their dogs. So I'm going to ask, and this guy was chuffed, and I don't know that it had happened to him before. Anyway, I digress. They bring a lot of joy, but I've always said the one thing about them is they just don't live long enough. And it's terribly, terribly painful. And it's probably quite a classic example, isn't it? That if you've lost a beloved pet, often people say, I can't go through that again. I can't do that again. It's too painful. It's just too hard. But would we trade all the love, all the joy, all the connection, all those sloppy kisses on the face and, you know, that look of excitement when you're taking them to the park? Right now, my dog's just sound asleep in his beautiful, big, overly priced, expensive, gorgeous, fluffy bed. And it brings me joy just seeing him. And yet the pain of losing a pet is so difficult, but I wouldn't trade one for the other. And it's a lens through which I've learned to look at other things through. As painful as life can be, it's painful because of the greatness of life and the joy and the wonderful aspects of life that we get through our connections, our relationships, our work, our hobbies, our sport. But it's, when it comes to parenting in particular, it's really tough, isn't it, for parents to be able to hold that space and not want to put a silver lining around what's happening for their kids. What would you say to parents listening who really struggle when there's a lot of distress in someone that they care about, or anyone listening who finds it really hard to be able to manage how they respond to someone else's distress and wants to dive in to kind of make things better? What suggestions or insights could you share? It's
probably the single most common thing the young people I work with complain about is they feel like my parents just won't listen. And it's often parents trying to ask too many questions, trying to silver line it, trying to be positive. Because I work with families, I see it happen live where a young person will say something and then the parent will respond with their own anxieties or their own judgments or their own solutions, and then maybe feel hurt or rejected if the young person doesn't want to hear it or wants to problem solve it. And I think that goes across so many relationships. I see couples do it. I see older, families do it, even with grown-up children. And most of us don't want solutions. It makes us feel stupid. If I'm complaining about a busy day at work, or if I'm talking about, recruitment. I was recruiting at the moment and, it was quite stressful and there's a lot of pieces to kind of put in place, and I was getting some sort of my onboarding paperwork ready, and someone's like, well, have you thought about advertising on Seek? And I'm like, of course I have. Like, what do you take me for? Like, it's not, it's just like, do you think I'm that stupid? So sometimes they think they're helpful or trying to be a part of the conversation. But if I'm coming at that with some distress or some anxiety, that's really unhelpful. So it could be definitely talk less in those moments. And maybe instead of asking, are you okay? Or what are you feeling? It might be, for younger people, it could be actually labeling it. You look worried, and then silence. If it's someone who's gone through a difficult time, it could be, instead of saying, are you okay? It might just say, wow, what was that experience like for you? It's inviting a different type of response, because the second we silver line something or we try to think of but we've lost empathy.
Yes. It can be so invalidating, and it's often instinctive, isn't it, to jump in and try to problem solve, because is it as simple as we see pain, that makes it painful for us to witness. We don't like somebody we care about experiencing pain, and so we're trying to come up with a solution to somehow improve the situation for them, which will, by default improve the situation for us, even though this isn't conscious. We're not sort of thinking this through as we're doing it. But in actual fact, it actually makes things worse, doesn't it?
Yeah, and with when I work with parents, and I'm sort of halfway through a 6 week parenting course at the moment. One of the cohorts is taking a break for this upcoming school holidays, and that's the biggest thing they struggle with is if you overreact or you try to problem solve something that's small, and you have hundreds of those moments over time, they're not going to come to you when things are really significant. If you can't handle, if someone's like, oh, I lost my phone, and you're like, you're so ungrateful, you're so disrespectful, and your reaction's huge. And then they're like, oh, I've forgotten my thing, I'm running late. And like, you're always like if you keep over responding and get overactivated, they're not going to come to you, or they're less likely to come to you when there's something really scary and really dangerous or really icky for them, because they're like, well, I get in trouble when I'm vulnerable, or they don't have this same language. They just learn, if I do this, you respond this way, so I should just stop doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that beautiful meme that listen when they come to you for the little stuff. That way they'll come to you for the big stuff, but to them, it's all big stuff. And so each moment is an opportunity. And we don't get it right all the time, do we? Sometimes we do get a shock, or if something happens and somebody tells us, we can react instead of respond. And so I'd like for everyone listening to sort of have a lot of compassion for yourself, because, I love the saying, I think it was Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. And even when we know better, we don't do better all the time. It's a learning curve for us as well. For people listening who can sort of acknowledge, hey, I think I do get a bit reactive. I feel really affected by the things that happen to the people that are close to me, and I can, if people are recognizing, hey, this is me. I know I've been doing this. What would be a way for a simple starting point, I suppose, for people who find themselves becoming quite reactive when other people are distressed, to start to sort of regulate themselves a little bit better, so that they can be more of a listener and less of a fixer?
I think if it's parents with their children, the responsibility, the larger bit of that does fall on the parents. You have to find a way to calm yourself down, because how can you expect them to if they're not observing that? It's really hard for them to be what they can't see. So if you flip your lid easily, if you get really activated, if you're really over anxious, or, have big emotions and display them in a way that's not helpful, they're not going to learn how to regulate themselves. So that bigger responsibility falls on you. I would encourage people, and this is the challenging thing some of the parents I work with face, is you have to role model the behavior you want for your kids. So if you want them to show respect and you want them to show accountability, it's not about you telling them, I want you to be accountable. It's about you saying, oh, I have to be accountable. And then going up to them and saying, wanted to talk to you about what I said yesterday. What you did was still not okay, and there'll be consequences for that. How I responded was also not okay, and I want to apologize for my response. And that gives them the language to start to do that, because how else will they come to you and say, I wanted to take responsibility for, yes, I took your car, I know you gave me permission, and I scratched it and I hid it from you, or whatever. Like, they're not going to know how to come to you and take responsibility and be accountable if they've never witnessed that, if they don't have a language for it. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I got so much of this wrong, own it. Just say, I was listening to a podcast episode that made me think about some of the responses I've had, or it made me think of an XYZ conversation, and I want to say, I got that wrong, and I'm going to try and do better. And just start owning it. You have to start owning it.
I think it's so powerful when we can do that, and I've done that before, and I've also learned how I operate as a human. And for example, we have a new couch, and I know that is such a random thing to say, but stay with me. So we have a family room and a lounge room. We don't have a really big house, but we're lucky to have kind of 2 living areas. We only have 1 bathroom and 1 toilet. That's a story for another day. That's a difficult situation with 2 teenagers and 2 adults. However, this new couch that we have bought is much bigger than the other couch that we used to have. And what it means is we can all fit on it. And it has been such a beautiful reconnection for us in the evenings to watch a show together or watch a couple of episodes of a show together after all the sports and everything else is done. But what I'm finding is what used to happen was that we would be more separate in the house and I would have a little bit more alone time, so to speak. And so I wouldn't be surrounded by my family up until sort of bedtime or thereabouts. And what I know about myself is that as the day gets later and later, it's not super late, but as the evening wears on, I just become more reactive. My serotonin is, lowering. I know that I'm getting tired. Sometimes some people might call me a little bit stroppy. And I just don't have that little bit of extra bandwidth, that little bit of extra space to kind of manage myself. And so I've not only had times where I've repaired and acknowledged that I've overreacted or, responded in a way that wasn't helpful. I've also started to sort of help let everyone know that this is kind of just how I am. This is what happens with me. And so there's that understanding. And I know that it might sound like it's kind of trying to teach everyone else to be tiptoeing around me. It's not that, but it's just when we understand how each other operates and that we have our strengths and weaknesses, I think that can help a lot as well. I mean, am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what I'm hearing in that is apologizing if you do get it wrong, but then thinking this is actually how my body works. And so you'll start to develop ways of saying, oh, you know what? I'm not going to have this conversation now. You're not going to get the best version of me. And you start to then think, well, if this happens often, if you've got a young person in your life who loves to download and vent at the end of the day when you've got the least bandwidth, then that's something to compromise on with your family, of saying maybe after dinner you go for a walk, or maybe it's like, unless it's urgent, that can wait till Saturday. So then you start to come into a flow of how do we then get our needs met? How do I stay connected with you and let you download or vent or do whatever, not at a time where my body just won't give you the best response, but you still have this need from me. And they might not want to do it first thing in the morning when their body clock's very different to yours. And you might be happy to say, let's go for work at 6:30 and I can talk then, I'll be great. And they're like, no, I'm still snoozing. So then it's figuring out this is where your discrepancy lies as a family. Where can you then insert that? And that's when that practical bit comes through. Like you can have that practical component, but it requires a little bit of reflection and insight into what's happening for you, what's happening for them, to then be able to have that.
I love that this idea that you won't get the best version of me. I can't operate the way I want to operate. I can't respond. I can't listen. I can't, and we don't have to verbalize that. But just, I think for us to understand ourselves and give ourselves that grace and that self-reflection that we all have different chronotypes. Some of us are, I say us, I am not one, an early bird. Some are middle birds and some are night owls. And we all have needs as people, and a bit of time away from your kids, a little bit of downtime and a little bit of alone time recharges you. And so I've noticed that because we're all spending so much more time together of an evening, which I love, we are all just loving it. It's just been beautiful. I've also noticed that, and Peter's so funny because he'll sort of go, oh, it's happening, especially because they just want to talk about the show and discuss it. And I just want to sit and listen and just get lost in what's happening. Anyway, so it's complex, isn't it? It's, and that's the whole point of this conversation. And I think the more we can learn about ourselves and also to kind of know how we do respond to others. I have a person that I know in my life who had to have a conversation with their children to say, when something happens with you, I know I go into fear. I go into a fear response, and that influences the way that this person responds in the moment. And so with that learning and that self-reflection and that conversation, that change is shifting. That change is happening. There's no switches we can flick. It just takes time, doesn't it, to have time to reflect, but also to listen and learn and be kind to ourselves when we are on that journey, because we're, for the rest of our lives, and depending on what's happening in our lives will determine how we respond to other people. But over time, we get better at it. We really do. We find the ways to ground ourselves and to hold ourselves and regulate ourselves so that we can let that out later. But in the moment when we're with somebody who needs us to remain grounded and regulated, we do get better at that over time, don't we?
Yeah. And I would encourage you. I do use that phrase. You're not going to get the best of me right now. If I've come home from a long day and someone, a friend, family member, partner wants to have a really big conversation, I'll be like, look, this is really important. I'm not going to respond well right now. And instead of just saying later, it's then actually penciling in a time. I can get up early. We can talk about it tomorrow. Or if it's a Thursday night, I might say, can I wait till Saturday morning and we can talk about it then? So it might not be their preference, but it will go poorly if they say it now. So being able to pause. And again, for parents, what I encourage them to think about is, especially as they move into adolescence, everything you're doing is then teaching them how to kind of respond. So it has to be shown and modeled, not dictated and told. So the more you're able to do this, you're teaching them, or they're observing how to regulate, how to have tough conversations, how to do it. It's not just about that individual problem, or that, it's not about the thing that it's about. It's how can you show them this process? How could you teach them how to do it? And people are really good. I had a parent yesterday, was it yesterday? Whenever the course was, Monday night, saying, I do this with my staff, but I just can't do it at home. She'll be like, I model, I let them have a go, then we talk about it, and then I give them a chance to do it on their own. She's like, I really struggle to do it at home. And it was just a way for her to start to think, I can benefit from doing it, teaching them. Like, there's a different type of learning that sometimes people forget about.
Yes. And some contexts, it's easier than others. It's less emotional at work. Often that's the case, isn't it? And what about when, teenagers, sticking to the teenage theme for the moment, that they've experienced distress, they've had a bad day at school, and they don't want to talk about it because talking about it is painful. From my point of view, I might see that, I can see that this hasn't been a good day. And I can tell by the interactions when we do pick up that that's been the case. And they don't want to have a conversation about it. They don't feel the need to talk about it. They just want to handle it on their own. That's hard too sometimes, isn't it? Because I know I get really curious and I get anxious. I sort of think, what happened? And I do recall on one occasion, I was that parent that was just asking a few questions because it was about my pain. I needed the answers because my uncertainty was taking me to places that were bigger and scarier than the circumstances of the experience of my child. And so it's hard sometimes because they do learn over time to be able to cope with things on their own. They don't always have to talk to us, and that's hard too.
You touched on something really important there because it became about you, not about them.
Yes.
And it was either their feeling of rejection or not knowing or wanting to be involved. And so when I tell parents to be curious, I mean curious about the young person's experience and being okay with that, not about like, tell me what happened and was it this person and was it that person and did this? And then there's obviously a threshold where if you're noticing over time indications that their mental health isn't great, that's then a different conversation. You can then say, hey, I've noticed over 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, X, Y, Z, very different to, they might be happy to talk about it, just not with you. That's developmentally appropriate. They might know that they're feeling overwhelmed from just being overstimulated at school, and they might not need to problem solve it with you. So sometimes I let people know, you can just say, you look like you're upset, or you look like XYZ. Do you need to vent? Do you want some space, or do you want a distraction? And maybe actually it shows you've seen me, you've heard me, and you're giving me some options. So maybe actually letting them know what role you can play.
Yes.
And if they want to vent, then say, is it a vent, or do you want to problem solve? And then shut up and listen if they say I want to vent, because they might just want to download.
Yes. Yeah. 2 ears, 1 mouth. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I was in that moment able to recognize that I want to know what's happened, because this is making I can see you're upset. It's making me feel anxious about what's happened. And I even on one occasion, I said, was there an incident? And this child of mine, who shall remain, nameless, said, was there an incident? What? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I said, this is my anxiety speaking. This is about me feeling anxious that something's happened. I'm sorry. And so I was really called out in a beautiful way, because that's exactly what was happening. And so, and that those feelings are still very real for us, but we don't serve our kids or other people that we care about when they're sharing with us, or when we can see that there's a need and that it becomes about us. And we've all probably in our lives complained about people who make it all about them. And it's certainly not strengthening for a relationship. It does the opposite, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes parents have an instinct to make the kid the project, but it needs to be yourself.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have so much influence on our children's mental health and well-being and life, but most of that comes by, like you've said multiple times throughout this conversation, what we're modelling, what we're showing by what we're doing. Before we finish up, Marie, gosh, the time's just flown. When it comes to these complexities for all of us as individuals and in relationships, what can we do when we do find that we need a little bit of extra help? Because so many people are still telling me that they are struggling to get the help they need through therapy, through professional mental health support. Could you please just remind our listeners which mental health professionals listeners would need a referral for, which mental health professionals you can go direct to, and so that if listeners are thinking, hey, this has really been great food for thought, I think I could do with some extra support here. What are some of the options? Because a lot of people are struggling to find the help they need still. Yeah,
so there's so many different levels, and I can see why it's so confusing, because we have a bit of an understanding of what we need to do for physical health. It's like, oh, I go to the GP for this, I go to the chemist for this, but then it's really hard to know, what do I do for back, for muscle, for feet, for knee, So mental health can be the same. You don't need a referral to go see a therapist. The referral is helpful from your GP if you're looking at getting the mental health rebate for those folks here in Australia. And that's only if you've got a diagnosis and you only get up to 10 sessions rebated. There'll still be a gap fee. There are a lot of really experienced professionals who don't fall under the Medicare benefit program. So counsellors are excellent, social workers are excellent, occupational therapists, and then there are people who've registered to be able to provide the rebate. So accredited mental health social workers, mental health occupational therapists. There's a lot of people out there who are really, really great that Medicare doesn't. So I would almost ignore that whole system and look for what's going to be the right fit for you. Some people seem to think, oh, if I just get a clinical psychologist, that'll help. And they might know nothing about the area of need that you have. So it's not about that person's piece of paper. After several years of clinical experience, that doesn't really matter as much. It's really what that person works through. it'd be looking at websites, like there are some big sort of websites like Psychology Today where you can kind of look at different practitioners. There are some parenting workshops you can do. So I've got my program Connected Teens, which combines values-based work with some adolescent development information and system stuff. There's the Parent Hope Project that is run tuning into teens. So I also facilitate that, but there are lots of facilitators around. There's, I think, the Triple P parenting program. So I would encourage parents to look at what role they play and what they can do, because sometimes being a listening ear and providing connection might mean that your young person doesn't need therapy. So that's also one to think about. There are a lot of online tools, but I think the perspective I come from is feeling heard and seen and connected is often the most important thing. So you could read a self-help book on ACT or CBT, but for a young person, that's going to feel like homework. And who wants to do that? That is boring, especially if your parents kind of like frisbee it to you and be like, here, read this, it'll help. It's not going to help.
Yeah.
So I encourage parents to think about that. And also, if they've got someone who doesn't want to go to therapy, there's a lot that the parent can do themselves. Think about their reactivity, what role they play, how what maybe they do reinforces the behavior they're trying to reduce, and really thinking about the system, because we are individuals, but we don't live in silos. We live in relationships, and it's really important to think about that context.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's an overdue question for me on the podcast, because there are still so many people who are looking for help, and I think you've just opened the doors with a new way of thinking about it. So I really, really appreciate that. How can people connect with you? I know that your podcast is available on Apple, and it's called This Complex Life, Apple and Spotify and Google, no doubt, and your favorite podcasting platform. How can people connect with you and your wonderful, wonderful work?
Yeah, so my counselling practice, the Therapy Hub, that's at thetherapyhub.com.au, and I'll give you a link for that journal for the how to get ready for therapy, so people can access that. I have also my marievakakis.com.au, and through that I run all my programs. So the Connected Teens program is the one that will be launching another round in end of October. And that'll be all online, so parents can kind of consume the content and then have a live Q&A. So it's a bit of a hybrid on-demand versus kind of live thing. I'm on all the socials under both the Therapy Hub and Marie Vakakis, so you can find me lots of places.
Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, thank you again. I'm so grateful to you and for the wonderful work that you do, and for making these kinds of conversations really available to people, obviously by connecting with me here on my podcast, but also the work that you do on yours. I know it's a labor of love when it comes to these things. So, so a big thank you from me to you, and thank you again for sharing your wonderful wisdom with us today. And thank you, listeners. Thank you so much for being here with us. Honestly, it's just such a joy for me to have these conversations and to bring wonderful people like Marie back into your ears. Episode 59 was the previous recording that we did that was called You Don't Have to Fix It. And I just love Marie's work. So please check out everything that she's doing. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you again next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.